not that one, not that one. That's the elevations. If you look at that, yeah, we have another diagram. But if you look at the drawings that you have in your set, 137A and 138, those are the diagrams that show all the sightline conditions. And you can basically see when you approach 137A. Yeah.
137A.
Yeah. If you can spin that around. So you can see as you approach from the water tower where there's 90% visibility. But again, the visibility is really something that is the same height as the existing atrium, so it's not going above it. And as you get closer, you can see 75, 50, and eventually you get so close that you can't see any of the building. And then on the next sheet, 138, again, you can see the diagrams with the sightlines at the bottom where it's really, very little visibility.
Do you have an image of what it's going to look like? I mean, I think that...
Well, the rendering is the best.
Right, but the rendering is kind of
It's kind of
from
this
an
way,
angle, so
instead
that's
of
not really
looking
giving
at-
you, that's not what I'm asking for.
Okay.
I'm asking for
Direct-
from the driveway, right?
Well,
That was my initial question. And you're not going to see us.
so this is the existing facade. This is the hotel portion. And it's a detail because it's a very long building. But this is essentially the same height of the existing atrium beyond. So we're just building something in front of it that matches the height, but is the same materials as the current wall below. It's glass, and it's metal to mimic the Corten steel that's on the existing atriums beyond. So this is something that was discussed with the National Park Service, and they approved this approach in terms of maintaining the
Just
historic.
for clarification,
Yeah, go ahead.
we need to understand this. That piece on top
Right.
is just a facade you're putting on an existing wall.
Well, it's not an existing wall.
Because
We're building-
otherwise, it appears to me you're building on top.
Yeah, no, this is,
And that's what I'm trying to clarify.
what you're seeing is this wall right here. This wall right here, these walls are this right here. And it goes-
Again, I'm,
Okay. Go ahead.
all right. If I look at the building now,
Yeah.
if this is what, I'm not going to see anything here. I'm just going to see this.
Well, you're going to see this, beyond you're going to see this, the existing atrium beyond.
Do you have anything that shows what the existing view is now?
Because, again, this looks like it's added.
Correct.
We have all the views of this thing
Yeah.
Can I take a shot at this?
in your.
Please.
I just swear in, okay. So,
Another-
okay, let me take a shot at this and then,
Yeah.
the concept is, when you drive up to the building today, you see the building, and then you see, and here's the, page A142, you see the different views both before and after.
Right.
So what you do is you see the building, and then on top of that, you see the clear story, which is almost 14 feet tall, about 14 feet tall, and that's set back about 100 and something feet. What we're doing is, if you look clearly at the hotel, and it's easier to see it on the rendering, we're mimicking that, but bringing it forward and bringing it back. So what happens is, we're the same height, and we're going to be the same color. And the idea is that in your mind's eye, once the entire facade is there, you almost can't tell the difference between 100 feet and 36 or 39 feet. That was the idea, and if you look closely at the drawing, I know it's an aerial, but if you look at the drawing, you'll see that there's an odd shape to the hotel. We don't just go straight across. The reason for that is because we paid a lot of attention to the view. It's not going to be identical, but the idea is that it mimics what's there today, just brings it forward. And that's what we've done.
Thank you. I fully understand.
Thank you.
You're going to hire me for it.
Yeah, if you look in here, there's lots of other diagrams that really support all of this, you know, the before and after. So,
Question.
Yeah.
Is that the proposed finished view that we would see pulling up to the building?
Well, that is a portion. That's not the full elevation, because that would extend all the way over.
No, I know that section of it. I'm saying if I look directly at the building and I looked at the glass, right, the original building,
Yeah.
is that the top part is the final product of the hotel, is that correct?
Yeah.
And you said that looks similar? That does not look similar to me with regards to the glass and the color. I mean, they could match that kind of
Go ahead.
glass.
Well, the
Yeah.
You guys understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, it's similar to the look of the existing skylights that are there. So the Park Service directed us to mimic, there was a choice to mimic the color of the
Right.
building
Okay.
here,
Right.
or the skylights have a darker color. It's a little bit more bronzy, as you can see, and it has there's a certain look to it. So they asked us to mimic that, again, because of the historical context. They wanted to look the way it looked all along. So today, if you drive there tomorrow morning, you'll see this color, which is more reflective.
Right.
And really what you're seeing here is the blue sky. The glass doesn't really have much of its own color. It's reflecting the higher portion, the existing skylight, and because of that, the hotel are more bronzy, and there's a lot of Corten steel. So we've mimicked that look to keep the historical context. So when he says it's the same as what's there, it's the same as the color of the skylight, not the color of the glass
facade.
below.
Okay.
I'm just trying to clarify,
Yep,
I'm
that's
sorry.
good.
You're out.
I'm
Ralph?
looking,
Yep.
I'm just looking at A144, and in what you have as the existing facade, it blends. But when you look at the proposed, you can certainly see the difference as if it's just plopped on top of the building. So from an aesthetic perspective, what exists seems to flow much more nicely
I agree.
than what you've got in the proposed.
You just keep it one color, basically as the customer.
They can't, you cannot.
So we're looking at A144, existing and proposed, and you're saying, what was your comment
Well,
again?
under the existing, it flows, it blends, it looks to be basically the same color, and you're looking at and then when you look at the proposed,
Yeah.
it looks like the top portion is just plopped on top.
I agree.
It's a very subtle difference.
That doesn't
Not
look
to
too,
me.
that doesn't look subtle.
Yeah.
That is not
So
subtle.
in this picture,
That is not subtle.
this is a rendering, this is this is not subtle, but that's actually what's there today.
Yeah, but we're bringing it forward, so it
Correct.
will be more visible.
It'll,
You said it was 100 feet back, and now we're moving it,
correct.
closer. You have to 30 feet or so.
We-
That looks, I'm just wondering, was it, from a historical standpoint, that they said you cannot
Correct.
do that
Yes.
type of glass
Yes,
up there?
Yeah,
they sent the guy down from Washington,
Yeah.
and we had to make mock-ups.
But I
and
thought you said you had the option.
No, we discussed the option,
Okay.
they made us build mock-ups. They came down from Washington, the head guy from National Park Service came down and said it has to mimic the color that's there. That's what's there today, and it's what Eero Saarinen did in 1960s, and we have no choice. If we're gonna build a hotel, it's gonna have to be that color. We can show you the condition, I think it's an exhibit, it specifically calls it out.
Yeah, actually, Ralph, weren't there a couple of different glass tints that they picked out?
Yes, they picked the glass tint and everything. It's the federal government, it's not us. I mean, we actually did propose both. To be honest with you, I'm ambivalent. I'm not as passionate about it as you are, but the choice was not ours. And they made us, it's going to look, once the entire facade is there, your mind, and you'll know because you moved it forward, but and the National Park Service agreed, there's very strict criteria you have to meet in order to add to a historic building. And it took us almost 2 years to get this through there.
So we basically have to say,
Well, you could approve or disapprove, but then we couldn't build a hotel. But we cannot build it with this colored glass.
That's just, that to me is an eyesore, complete eyesore.
You can understand their frustration in that this designation was not something that the township imposed upon you. You sought it on your own, and now we're being left to live with the requirements of a
Right.
designation that maybe we are not happy with. So I think what the board is saying is, you know, they don't like the way it looks. So we have to come up with something else.
My understanding is that what the National Park Service requested that the appearance of the hotel facade, which is pulled forward, mimic the existing atrium clear story facade.
Yeah, it's not being,
Yeah.
that's not being disputed, you know, I fully understand that.
Yeah, so-
I think,
Yeah.
what I think everybody's looking at is, it looks like something just plopped on top of the building
That's the
now.
existing-
I know,
That's
you
there.
can't, I know that,
Yeah.
but if you look at this, you can have, you
We
know.
understand your
Yeah.
comment.
Doctor,
yeah.
if I could put both of your minds a
Yeah.
little bit at ease.
Sure.
I've been in front of this board for many, many times, and I hope I have some credibility here. I will tell you that you never look at it at this elevation. This is an elevation drawing showing very flat, and it's very deceiving. This is set 39 feet back.
So I might see a portion of that, not the
Right,
whole.
and not only that, you never see it at that thing. I can guarantee you, go there tomorrow morning and look at it, you'll see these two colors. You've never noticed it because your eye stops at the main building and will continue to do so.
I don't see it because it's 100 feet back.
You
That's
see it,
why I see it.
you look at the picture, I promise you, you see it. and
That's a
I-
big difference. 130 versus 30 feet is a huge difference. You'd be able to see, if you're moving something, a structure 70 feet more, you're gonna have a different vantage point of how you're gonna view that.
When you get closer, like on page 140,
Yeah.
you can see, and that's, you know, still pretty far away, but, well, it's at the entrance, but, you know, you're approaching the building, and at that point, you can see the existing versus the proposed. You can't see that at all, it's not visible. Page A140.
Well, let's take a look at all the vantage points that we have in the exhibit, because I think it's useful. I mean, I think that is a, you know, it's obviously just a snapshot of one view, but if you look at, we provided 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 views from the front as you come in.
Right.
You know, obviously 1 and 2, you're not seeing anything, and then when you go to 3, you know, it's,
That rendering is deceiving.
142.
well,
It's an elevation rendering.
Elevation is a flat-out drawing, it doesn't deal with height, it's just a head-on look.
so
It's not in 3 dimensions, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
I would guarantee you, it's not gonna be an eyesore, it's gonna be magnificent.
Yeah, I can see.
Your own planner.
Okay, my question here, in this exhibit here, where it says existing north face facade from viewpoint 1, those two, what are those two things that are on top of the building right now? Those are the,
Which sheet?
the existing north face facade from viewpoint 1. So that's on page
On what?
A140.
Okay.
And is that what these are supposed to mimic?
Those little,
Yeah, there's two buildings on top of.
well, those I believe are the stair and, you know,
Those are the bulkhead.
those are the
Those are the
bulkheads.
bulkhead in the core area for the elevator.
And that is 100, and that's 100 feet, you're saying off?
So I believe.
That's, I'm sorry, I don't think so. I think what you're looking at is some fans,
You look at the rooftop elevation,
a lot of stuff.
page
here.
11, I think this is what they're referring to now. This is before. You can see the color that's down now does not match the existing building. So, and then this is the after. So it's, in essence, the same.
So getting-
Yeah, so that's deceiving. So that they are actually replicating what's there now.
Page 11.
Page 11 on the main elevation.
So on that drawing, where are those two buildings that I'm looking at in this picture right here?
Little raised projections.
Yes, those raised projections.
I believe
Where are
that
they?
it's probably one.
Those are elevator.
And that's all the way in, and then the hotel is gonna be coming out even further, so,
Further, but again.
and I can see that from here, so that's gonna be way more visible.
Again, those photo montages that you see on, you know, A140, those were all based on scale models. So we're not misleading in a way.
I'm not trying to say you're misleading, I'm just trying to say, if I can see that from this little point here, and that's 100 feet back, we can't, geometry is not gonna lie.
Right.
It's gonna come forward, and we're gonna see something a little bit even more different than what the building is right now.
Can I clarify? Those are both little pop-ups for the elevators.
Yeah.
You can see them over here, I'll show you where they are. On the rendering, I believe it's these.
Yeah, those two.
And so that's actually higher than everything else. It's just the elevator, because for requirements, you have to have room in case the elevator gets stuck and someone's on top of it.
The bulkhead.
Right? So that's the elevator bulkhead here and here. That's the only thing you're seeing. If you look at the roof today, it's actually all over the place. There's
Right.
elevators and all kinds. So it's going to actually be a much cleaner look, except for these two bulkheads that are.
Yeah.
When the Parks, when the Parks representative came down, did you put up any kind of like a mock-up? Like
Yes.
against the wall?
Yes.
Exactly where that
Yes.
setback was to occur?
Yes.
They were portions of this wall, so they were put in the right relationship relative to this facade, and they were built to scale out of the real materials.
So, if I may, the facade is the same color as the existing building, yes or no?
As the
That's the
skylines.
skylines.
These right here.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's a different shade,
Yeah.
completely different shade. And then you have about a foot of that brownish.
The cortan steel. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
steel, yeah.
you're the professionals.
It's just steel.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you get about a foot of that.
Yeah, or it actually maybe a little bit more.
And you cannot make the facade, the same color as the facade, you can't do it.
This
Yeah.
facade, they asked us not to.
All right, just, let me try to simplify this and bring this a little bit of conclusion here. You did a mock-up, the National Park Service came down and looked at it. You previously stated the National Park Service said the vista of the building should remain what it is today.
Correct.
Okay, so they are fine with, okay, that's all I need to know, thank you.
Yeah, I think the answer is, this is what Historic Park Service approved. They have a concept in mind as to why they think this is preferable. It's not for us mere mortals to question at this point. I think a lot of time in planning what it is. And you have some of the best architects in the country working on this, so rest assured that.
Well, quite honestly, I'm comfortable with the National Park Service not wanting to change the vista. If they don't believe to change the vista, then I'm comfortable.
Agreed. And I think the architectural team that's doing this is, you'll be very proud, as I think you are, of what's happened at the building so far.
If I may, just to put things in context, because we have the history of doing this, this is not the first time we've also had disagreements with the historical over the years, and some of the requirements they put on us. I know some of you may recall that we actually wanted to change the lower facade as well and remove some of that lower overhanging portico that's there when you come in, and I thought it was pretty bad. Now it's got some beautiful lights, it looks like a marquee. We went through a year and a half of discussions on that, and they imposed on us, even inside the building, what we found is that it resonates very well with the public. At the end of the day, having this sort of oversight has kept us honest and has kept Bell Works very true to its traditions. So some of the things that we may not appreciate originally, we've grown to, and the building is pretty much loved because it looks like it always did. And this is an attempt to keep that and still bring it up, so I apologize.
You have all this in writing from the.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Right.
We can share it with you.
And we'll need to submit that to the board professionals as a commission.
Yes, we will.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah. All right, let's.
Any other questions?
I do have a question in regards of the accessibility from the rooms to this terrace. Does every room has access to the terrace?
Well, the
Can you smoke it
terrace,
outside? I mean, what's
the terraces right now, generally, most of them do, but that's something that, again, once a hotel operator comes on board, we may eliminate some of them. It's not a fixed thing. The rooms, we definitely want to have around 200 or maximum of 200, but the decks are something that may change a little bit. But they're very low to the roof. It's only about 3.5 feet above the existing roof.
What is the height of the walls for the deck?
the walls for the
In
deck.
other words, I don't know, is it going to be, are they walls, are they railings here? I can't tell.
They're
from
glass,
the-
if we have decks, they will be glass railings, completely glass so that they really disappear.
Yeah, over here, this is outdoor seating.
Yeah. Those would be glass railings.
And how high are those going to be?
Normally, they're 3.5 feet, 42 inches is the standard height. And then, just some other statistics on the building. I think there were some questions about, the exact square footage. So right now, the plans are based on a total of about 136,000 square feet total for the hotel, but some of that is on the ground floor and the concourse level. So the rooftop addition is about 116,000 square feet. And then we have approximately a little bit over 10,000 in the concourse level and just under 9,000 on the ground floor. So that is total square footage. I know that we talked about the dimensions of the setbacks for the hotel, so that's 39 feet. The number of rooms, maximum of 200 with about 22 suites. And again, once the operator gets on board, that might change a little bit.
But no more.
No more.
If I can interrupt you on
Yeah.
that, what is the anticipated maximum occupancy?
In terms of occupants,
What the
In
capacity?
the hotel or the overall
And the
building?
hotel, what you're talking about building up top there. What are the maximum number of people that can be up there?
well, in terms of the number of guests, that's one figure. But in terms of the occupancy load, is that
Correct.
from a building code question? Yeah, I don't think we have developed that information. We'll do it based on, what's permitted by code, and also what's permitted by the stairs that we're providing. The occupancy is limited by the egress width.
I'm curious how that plays into, and this I guess would be a question for our professionals, how that plays into any parking that has to be considered.
Parking is not a factor of occupancy, so the redevelopment plan calls for 1.1 space per room.
Yeah.
And so it's based on square footage or it's based on rooms, but the number of people in the room is not
Right.
calculated parking.
I don't want to get too far, we'll get to that later, but there's ample parking for the entire site, based on what we have.
Yeah, I believe that I read somewhere that the parking is based on
Carl, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So any other questions of the architect before we move on to some of the technical? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I'd like to call Lenny Savino, who was with Langen Engineer, who did the original site plan, and is now here with the amended site plan, which doesn't change much at all. But we'll have Lenny describe. And this is an exhibit, Lenny, that you prepared.
Yep, that was provided in the application package. It is CS 100, which is...
A6.
Tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
State spelling your name for the record.
Sure, my name is Leonard, Leonard. Last name is Savino, S-A-V as in Victor, I-N-O. I'm the principal with Langen Engineering Environmental Services, professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, 25 years, and have testified before many boards, including this board.
And you were the engineer, civil engineer.
Or
on the
just
original
so the
site.
record's clear, he's been accepted as.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I just marked that exhibit as A6 for the record. So Lenny, why don't we talk a little bit about the site plan impacts this have, if any, and what the changes are to the site plan from what the board originally approved?
Certainly. Very simply, there's not a lot happening outside the building. So we do have an adjustment of the handicap parking, the ADA parking that was provided originally was in this area, which we call the smile at the front entrance. And also on each of the 4 quadrants. Since then, we are before you with an application for the ADA ramp. So there's going to be a ramp on either side of the main building. And because of that, we have adjusted and shifted the ADA parking so that they're at the closest location to where the ramp lands down. The only other thing that's changed a bit is we've added a few electrical charging stations for some cars on both sides. And I believe that's it.
And then in regard to the electrical charging stations, I noticed it was only like 3 on either side or something.
At this time, we have 3 on either side, that is correct.
According to the document I'm reading, you're looking at roughly, let's see, a total parking space of 4,346. You are using 4214.
Yes, so,
Bonnie, go ahead.
Well, the information in a technical memorandum that was passed around, they have provided that it's like 1,100,000 and something, I lost my number somewhere over here, of the square footage of the building would require like 4,400 parking spaces.
Right.
They're not including parking requirements per our ordinance for unleasable areas, like the atrium and stuff like that. So technically by ordinance, that parking number of required is actually bigger, because we have the big atrium that goes all the way up. They have, I think, 4,236 regular parking spaces.
4214. That's what I have in front of me, okay. That's a 22
Well,
space,
no,
that's okay.
that shared parking credit is they're applying, but it's not, that number is not quite
All
right, because it's based on the whole building.
Okay.
So, but the total number of parking spaces provided is the 42,000, or 4236.
4236,
Deputy Mayor, we have Carl Pankey with us this evening.
Oh, he's here? I didn't know that.
He's
Okay,
going
I'm
to give a
sorry.
nice little presentation.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I think he'll make
Okay.
it straightforward. We've been working on it for a couple of weeks now.
All right, I didn't know Paul was here.
Yes, he is. So there are some technical questions that your engineer asked us to comment on, so we'd like to go through those quickly just to make sure we respond, because obviously there's some that require testimony, everything else we're compliant with. But Lenny, why don't we run through the comments that D&M asked us to comment on? And also Jen had a couple items. One was, can you confirm there's no new signage proposed for?
Yes, there's no new signage proposed.
Okay, and just confirm how the solid waste and trash and recycling is supposed to be handled by the hotel.
So there'll be no changes to operation currently, which is down underneath the building. There's roadways that bring you down, and that's where the refuse handle is going to be brought out. So you don't have to see it at all.
Okay. Let's go through the comments quickly here, unless the board wants to have more detail on anything. So, comment 2.1 of T&M's review letter, December 15th. Confirm no changes to proposed off-site and off-track improvements previously approved by the board.
That is correct. There are no changes.
No additional signage, you already commented on. Confirm no modification to the drainage or grading for the property.
There is no change to grading or drainage.
Could you comment on 5.4, confirm the applicant does not propose any changes to previously approved lighting plans?
We're not changing any of the lighting that was approved. We are adding lighting in the ADA ramps. Bollard lighting, very low lighting.
Confirm no modifications to impervious coverage.
There are no modifications to impervious coverage.
And we had at one time talked about maybe adding a playground for the day school, but that's been removed from the application, correct?
That is correct. There's no playground proposed at this time.
And confirm no trees will be removed as part of the ADA ramp installation.
There will be no trees removed as part of the ADA ramp.
And could you just quickly provide the board with a little bit of a overview of what this bollard lighting is going to be like and where it's located?
Certainly. Within the ADA handicap ramps
Can
themselves.
you show the board where that is?
Certainly.
And these are ramps for people in wheelchairs or handicapped to get
Correct.
into the building from
Yeah.
the.
Typical
handicap
ramp that you
space.
see everywhere. In fact, there's one right there, but it will not be aluminum, it will be concrete. They're going to be strategically located, because when you're looking at the building, you actually see a concrete wall. There are vents for the building that have been there for many years since the building was constructed. So what we are proposing is that the handicap ramp will be behind that, in between the two walls, essentially, So, that structure itself is a concrete structure with a concrete floor, so there's no increase in impervious coverages. It is the same. So basically, the grade will come out at the top, and the ramp will be constructed in between the two. So essentially, you're not building any walls, you're just building the ramp with the landings appropriately. The bollard lighting will follow at a height of about 3 feet on a spacing that makes sense for the distribution, which we have coordinated with the designer, which is PSMS. And basically, just light where you're walking when you see it on the ground. So for the most part, those lights will not even be seen, except when you come up to the very top here when you hit the landing on both sides. That's it. So, really unobtrusive.
And can you confirm that the applicant will get any outside agency approval that might be required for this site plan?
Yes, if any, we will.
Okay. Any questions? The engineer?
Just for the record, when you were doing the new ADA, we're removing the ADA and the smile, any handicap and smile, you're leaving it?
No, we are leaving what's in the smile. What we showed actually in this application was 53 total. In discussions with T&M Associates, the ordinance is a little more stringent than the ADA national ordinance, or the national standard. So we will be revising this plan to show 87 instead of the 53, which Carl Pinkley will be also testifying to. And that will put 45 back here, which are actually what's there now, what's been striped. And what we did do is we went to Near Maps and got a recent aerial photo. We've overlaid our site plan with what has been striped out there, and it is very, very close. We're going to coordinate on a couple minor things. But one of the major things is there are 45 spaces here. So we're going to leave the 45 here, which makes a lot of sense because it's the main entrance and there is an ADA ramp already there, and that's how people have been accessing. And then in this case, we'll have 21 on either side, which gets you to 87. Pretty simple.
Any other questions? All right, let's bring Carl Pankey up.
You good? Yeah, I think so. If I think anything else, I'll bring it up later.
Carl, are you still here?
Snuck out the back door.
Ran out the back door.
Why do we have you sworn, Carl?
Just going to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Just again, state your full name for the record, so.
Sure, for the record, my name is Carl with a K, Penke, P as in Peter, E-H-N-K-E.
Quickly, your experience and background.
Sure, I am a registered professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My area of expertise for the last 33 years is in traffic engineering, and I've appeared before this board in the past, as well as many other boards throughout the state of New Jersey and other states.
We ask that you accept Mr.
Accept it
as an expert in traffic.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Carl, before you get into your analysis, could you just confirm, because I think this is the overriding question, and Jen Bean pointed it out, can you confirm the adequacy of the parking for the proposed building as it's configured in the hotel with the on top?
Certainly. So for this application, we updated our parking projections based upon the redevelopment ordinance, consistent with the way we prepared the original parking projections associated with the original site plan approval. In preparing that update, I worked very closely with the owner and his team to define the current program and leased space within the building for office, for retail, for the library, and et cetera. As you're aware, it's changed a little bit over time from what we originally anticipated the development program would be in this building to what is in there today. So we spent a lot of time updating that. The owner also, as he's been working the building, has learned more about the building and has created a pretty solid definition as to the spaces that are in there as compared to maybe a little more amorphous understanding that they have when we started this application. So there's a lot more intelligence of what's going on. So your ordinance, the redevelopment plan, actually defines individual parking requirements for individual land uses, but then it also speaks specifically to the fact that this project lends itself very well to a shared parking approach. We have over 4,000 spaces distributed around the building, and those spaces are available to be utilized by the various tenants. So we went through the task of taking the current development program, identifying if it was all standalone and you had to park for each individual use, what would that requirement be, And then we also went through procedures that exist in the industry to develop what's known as a shared parking model. A shared parking model, it basically takes into account that various uses have different parking demands and different parking ratios during different days of the week. For instance, an office doesn't demand parking on a Saturday or a Sunday. Retail doesn't demand full parking on a weekday, it's more on a Saturday. A fitness center generally has morning peak periods, and so on. So the shared parking methodologies actually have developed curves that are by day of week, by hour of day, and by month of year to even take into account seasonality. And we're able to take that model and run it and determine the percentage or rough estimate as to what the shared parking reduction does in terms of a percentage overall reduction. And in running the models, we're seeing it's about 5 to 10% we're seeing as being the shared benefit that you get in the uses that are currently programmed. Right now, to be conservative, we're using the low end of that of 5%. So where that works out, and there is an updated parking memo, the numbers you referred to is in the original letter that I submitted, but since that time, at the request of T&M, we've gone back and have double-checked a couple of things in terms of the parking that's actually out there as a result of the reworks and striping that's been going on, as well as some calculations on the ADA spaces and the charging stations. So what we know is, based on individual uses, we require about 4,436 spaces, and that's so that everybody has their own space. And
can I just interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
But you have over 100,000 square feet as NA, miscellaneous.
Sure, and that,
which you need to factor that in at some point.
sure, so.
And that doesn't include the non-leasable space either.
That's correct, so that space was also in the original application and addressed that way too. That space is basically the basement space, it's non-programmed space, it's storage, it's not.
106,000 you're
Yes,
talking
it's
about?
not leased, it's pieces of the old cafeteria, it's space that just isn't leased, it's not programmed, it's not usable space, and it's a placeholder for what that space.
Is that going to be stated somewhere?
Will it ever be?
Well, that's the question, is it going to be stated somewhere, that number be leased?
If we do something with it, we would need to come back to this board and for a change in that. But that space actually was considered that way in the original application too.
I understand that, but I think given, I mean, even if you use rough numbers of 1 per 250 for that space, that's another like 400 parking spaces for that area, which even if you take the 5%, I mean, we just got this today, so I really haven't had a really good chance to look at it thoroughly, but it just seems to me, even with the 5% reduction, you're talking about, and that's before the atrium or the non-leasable space, you're talking that you're gonna be, you need like 4,500 parking spaces.
But there's no tenants in that space, there's no
Today.
demand or use.
So I guess the question that the deputy mayor asked for, so are you gonna stipulate that there's a deed restriction that it can never be leased? So therefore, just because there's nothing there now, doesn't mean there won't be something there in the future.
Hold on. We talked about this at the original site plan, and everybody acknowledged that the shared parking arrangement, and was approved this way, was something that made sense at this point. We have a lot of parking spaces out there. The agreement was, can I finish? The agreement was that if we ever lease up to a point where we have a parking issue, then we would come back before you and we'd add more parking to this site plan if needed. We all kind of understand that there's so many spaces, there's so many things going on, that this shared arrangement does make sense. And that's the way the board originally approved
I'm not
it.
challenging the shared arrangement. I actually factored in the 5% reduction for the shared arrangement, and you're still deficient if you calculate that space in.
We acknowledge if you go to the technical.
I'm not even talking about the atrium. I'm talking about the space in the basement that's 100,000 square feet, that's in the chart under miscellaneous.
So I think what we said last time to this same kind of concern that was raised was, if there comes a day where the site is leased up to a point where parking is an issue, we would come back and work with you to design additional parking areas if needed. We don't envision that happening. Again, I'm going to let Carl finish his testimony before he was interrupted, but I think he's trying to make that conclusion as an expert in the traffic.
It wasn't the writers, the question, Council, I resent that.
Well, I apologize, but he was gonna get to that point, and then we can have the questions. I think it's easier.
How many parking slots are we short?
Well,
Sure, we have.
Well,
Well, I think
there's no-
that's what I think Bonnie and I are struggling with, because this came in today, and I know you've been branding it around, but it's difficult to tell you without, I mean, we've been trying to calculate things very quickly on the fly, so, I think at some point, you're gonna have to give an educated guess as to what ultimately that space in the basement is gonna be used for, and factor in what the parking requirement for that would be. I don't take exception to the shared parking, I think we all agree, but I think to say that there's 100,000 square foot that you're not calculating into the parking demand could become problematic, I think.
You know, we want what's best for the developer, we want what's best for our residents, which is paramount. So that's what we've got to work through this.
We agree.
Can I share something at risk of part of that space, we didn't want it to be in the application because we're not ready for it, but we actually have plans to take a big chunk of that space, probably about 60,000 feet, and turn it into an internal garage. PSNS and Langen have been working on that plan. We have that plan out to bid. We didn't want it to be part of the submission because we're not ready for it yet, but just to talk about what's going, we have an agreement with our tenants. It's in our leases, the town is privy to those leases, to attempt to put internal parking. So we have those ramps that go into the lower level, and we've taken, I believe, again, I'm not giving accurate testimony here because I don't have those numbers, but I think it's approximately 60,000 square feet of that miscellaneous, and actually that would add another, I believe, 78 parking spaces. If you want, I could go down the block, pick it up, and bring it down here. So the point is, we don't really know what we're going to do with that space, but everything that's being used as a conference center is called out. And
Right,
we have
I'm
no
not
plans to-
disputing that,
Yeah.
I just think that, when we're talking about the adequacy of the overall parking, and we all recognize that there's 4,000 plus parking spaces out there, but when you calculate it out and we're still not sure how all the space is being used, I think that's where we're.
Let me just ask, does it make sense if what I'm hearing is that these plans are in motion for the garage parking? Why are we talking about all of this if we're going to be revisiting it, it sounds to me, in the very near future? Aren't we, what's being presented to